Welcome back to Great Scott Marcus here on Ramble Entertainment. I'm Scott and that one's Marc.
You're a
It
ghost.
might actually help if I actually sit down.
No, doesn't help at all.
Here in the topic today, what we want to talk about is football. Marc,
Football.
actually college football specifically. I'm gonna eat this messy as fuck Arby's Euro while you talk about college football. Congratulations, it's a topic about you, finally.
I have no idea where you want to go with this, though. It's a little difficult.
So, I'm curious
playoffs.
I'm curious where OSU is in standing for its
in
playoff
the playoff
standing.
rankings?
Yeah, its playoff standing. Playoffs have just started over the past 3 years for college football. That's as much as I understand about college football, really. But really, yeah, I want to understand where they stand, how you're feeling about the inclusion of playoffs within college football, how you feel about college football in general as of late, and I also want to say real quickly, as two graduates of Ohio State, hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to all those recovering from the kind of attack incident that happened this past week.
Yes. Where to start? I love college football. I think it's as opposed
almost
to NFL,
to a dangerous extent.
It's a little dangerous. I can get rather obsessive about it and slip into miniature depressions when my team, the Ohio State Buckeyes, lose. Well, I mean, last year when it was Michigan State, that basically blew our chances for the playoffs, which, fucked us. This year we lost to Penn State, which didn't really ruin our chances, but it really kind of put a cramp in our style with the college playoffs. At the moment, I believe we are number 2 still in the playoff rankings. Before I get too deep into that, I like the playoff system. I think it's 100% necessary because the bowl system in which it used to have only teams number 1 and 2 play was just kind of bullshit. You never really got the full effect of it. And in fact, other divisions in football, like Division 3 or something like that, they actually do have a full-fledged playoff system of 8 teams or so. It's not a new thing to college football, but it's just new to the BCS, the big schools, the teams that you see on TV and shit.
Playoffs aren't a new concept in general.
Right. I think it's important to say it's not a new concept in college football. It's just a newer concept in the BCS world of college football, or FBS, whatever the fuck it is.
It almost seems like one of these things where it's just how has it taken this long? In my mind. Because
absolutely it has. It's taken way too long, and here's what kind of sucks about it is that it needs heavily refinement right now. The reason for that is because I think it was here last year, 2 years ago. Ohio State has not gone in with a perfect undefeated schedule. We've always lost a game, and I want to say it was 2 years ago when we got in. We won the Big Ten championship, which boosted us into the playoffs to play. We were number 4 then because we were number 5 or 6. And then when we won our Big Ten championship, the playoff committee basically said, okay, that was good enough for you guys to end up in the playoffs. And we did. We played Alabama. They were number 1. We were number 4. We beat them, then played Oregon number 2 and beat them. We won. Cool. This year, Ohio State was not in the Big Ten playoff championship because our loss to Penn State. Penn State and Wisconsin played last night. Penn State won. Penn State is ranked number 5 in the AP, and I think they're ranked number 7 in the overall top 4 of the playoff system. So it's all sorts of fucked right now because Alabama's a shoo-in. You've got Clemson, which is probably going to be in 2. They've been favored heavily throughout the whole season. Then you've got Ohio State and Michigan, who have played phenomenal football throughout the entire season, despite the 2 losses. And many people are arguing that Michigan is the best team in the Big Ten. Of course, I'm biased, and I think Ohio State should go in. But the issue is Penn State has one more win than both of those teams, even though Penn State beat Ohio State, but they lost to Michigan. So it's you get this whole fucked up thing going on. And we beat Wisconsin, and Wisconsin lost to Michigan. Like, it's just like, what do you take into effect now with the college football playoffs being only 4 teams? Is it the number of wins? Is it quality of wins? Is it the championship? Should that even be included or not? It's a decision I'm glad I don't have to make, but I'm really hoping in the next. I think the current way the playoffs are going, it still needs to go for another year or two for some dumb contract. I don't know. It needs to change. You need to have at least 6 teams for reasons like this. Because I can't honestly sit here and say
should playoffs even be a single game? Obviously, playoffs are pretty founded. Let me go. Playoffs are pretty founded when it comes to professional football. Playoffs are pretty founded in with basketball. What you have is your kind of these divisions that break up into brackets each time you get to the round of 16, you get to the round of 8, the round of 4, and then your final 2. Esports even has adopted all these different methods. You even have round robin competitions, playoffs, where basically you have to win 2, but you can afford to lose 1. Baseball obviously functions in a decently similar manner, where if you play, what is it? Typically it's 5 games, and then the World Series is 7 games. And yeah, you just have to win 3. And so football has obviously always been a single game, you win or lose. But that doesn't have to translate to college ball. And one of the questions I actually want to ask you here, as somebody who is less knowledgeable in this subject matter, is there fantasy football for college?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Good.
I feel like that wouldn't be legal for some odd reason.
I feel like you could. I feel like with fantasy football, already too much is placed on your professional players, where it's just like they're just doing a job most of the time.
Right.
And yeah, it's for entertainment purposes, but we've both seen how people can take this too far, fantasy football. And these are college students, and that's another facet to this that I do want to talk about in this, where it's just like they should be treated more like college students. Obviously athletics is good for the college, it's good for entertainment is good for business, and unfortunately colleges are more business oriented these days than school oriented. And I'll want to ask your opinion on that, but before we get to that, on a college level, where do you want to see this small amalgamation of playoffs? Because I think it's 4 teams or 6 teams.
It's 4 teams right now.
4 teams. Yeah.
And we were just discussing it, the other night, me and a friend of mine, about having 6 teams, like kind of having like a wild card system where you have, you have 1 through
wild cards.
You have 2. Basically, you have a top 4, and then you have wild card 5 and 6. And what you would do is you give the top 2 teams, 1 and 2, a bye week, and then you have the wild card, you'd have 6 playing 3 and 4 playing 5. Just because with the reasons I stated earlier, the whole the championship games doesn't matter or not. It's all sorts of just fucked with only 4 teams. You need more teams than that. I would even be happy with 8, but the problem is, and this kind of goes along the lines with the idea of why only 1 game, is because it would just take way too fucking long. You can't have 2-3 games a week, whereas in the baseball World Series you play basically all 7 games in 10 days. Any football is about a week apart per game, and then you're extending into well into January, if not February, if you're starting to play more than 1 game in the playoff race. So I think 6 teams, like a wild card type thing. You give bye weeks, or just 8 teams, something like that. I don't think any more than 8 is necessary. But
obviously, you don't want to break what is already tradition. I was just giving different examples of how different sports work.
Right.
You probably still want a single game format, but
yes.
Is there an opportunity? Should there be any kind of? obviously the wild card system exists too, and I think what you bring up here is also a great point. But then you talk about
call it a wild card though. It would just be like that's just how it goes, I suppose.
So would Penn State have this if this wild card system existed now? Would Penn State have the opportunity to get in?
Probably.
So I know you were
talking. Penn State's not in the top 4. They're ranked like number 7. But I've
always been curious about how those
rankings
work, but I don't want to go into that right now.
No, it's a group of people that decide it. There's coaches polls. The big ones, like they have a coaches poll, and there's like the AP, which is Associated Press. They have a poll, and I'm not sure exactly how that polling goes. But then there's the college football playoff committee who decides like who's in the playoffs, and it's ex-players, ex-coaches, analysts. They're the ones that decide who goes to the actual playoff system.
Shouldn't some of this bias try to be removed and it become more mathematical? Because that is exactly how gaming works, where it's just based on algorithms and math, or it's just skill based, and obviously luck.
I think the hard part with college football being completely stats based is then you could say, okay, the two teams that are undefeated are 1 and 2. The problem with college ball is that there's a lot of divisions of college ball. Alabama's undefeated. They're probably going to win the whole thing. They could probably beat the Cleveland Browns right now if they really wanted to.
And I could walk out on the field and beat the Cleveland Browns.
You're new quarterback right there. Another team that's undefeated is Western Michigan, and you're probably like, who the fuck is that? Exactly.
Isn't that Michigan? Who's Michigan State?
Michigan State's out of East Lansing, but they're Michigan State. Like it's a big university. But like,
okay.
Then you've got like schools like
I like the Spartans. Outside of beating OSU, I've actually followed the Spartans for a long time. They're impressive.
But you've got teams like Western Michigan is in the same division as like Bowling Green, Toledo, Ohio University, Miami of Ohio. Like all of those are in different divisions.
There's a ton of colleges.
Exactly. There's a ton of colleges, different divisions. And it's like if you would put Western Michigan against Alabama, it would be an annihilation more than likely. I'm not saying it's absolutely going to happen. So it's like you can't just – that's the bad thing. You can't just
that is why there's divisions. And even in gaming, there's divisions. You have to exit your division. And when you enter another division, typically there is that jump in skill level. StarCraft has done it since, very early on, and that system exists because these stats measurements do matter, and you're placed into divisions because your stats do matter. In fact, isn't it the Spartans who actually changed divisions within the past 5 years? Didn't they used to not be Big Ten?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay,
it might have been a long time ago.
I'm very unknowledgeable about this, but I swear, when I went to Bowling Green, I could have sworn they were a part of Bowling Green's division at the same time, but I'm probably wrong about that. But moving forward from that point, I don't know. I don't see the argument in there, but. I obviously don't pay attention to physical sports, but at the same time, often electronic sports are a reflection of physical sports. However, they can use more math and algorithm to make these determinations. And your division is also a part of that.
I think the big thing with the divisions in college ball is just like, if you get a team like Western Michigan who's gone undefeated, you can't be like, oh, well, you're excluded from these just because you're a different division. Then every other division is going to raise some stink about it. Like, well, why not? Like, we're a college team, and they are indeed ranked among all the other Division A. I don't know. I don't know college football division names.
Well, I also wish I knew more about MMR, which is matchmaking rating, because it's a very, very complex system. It's not as simple as I've even boiled it down here. And obviously, the ranking system for college ball is a lot more complex than what we're boiling it down to here, too.
Kind of is, unfortunately. But I mean, it's like, I think the thing about college ball is like you want to give those small schools a chance to. Like Western Michigan they're probably ranked number 15 or something like that of everybody, which is good, but it's like, you get some people say, well, why not let them in the championship? Why not let them in the playoffs? And I'm happy I don't have to be the one to make those decisions. It's like, I love Ohio State. That's the problem. Like, I can't sit here and say, yes, we should absolutely be in the playoffs because we lost to Penn State and they've beaten everybody except for two teams, Michigan and Pitt. We beat Michigan and Pitt beat Clemson. It's just it's so you can't just say this team beat this team, so this team's over this team. Like there's so many of those little caveats
obviously,
in there,
and that doesn't even happen in gaming. Again, it's there are so many factors and algorithms that go into this, and really, I'm just trying to point to this idea of like you say that they're ex-coaches and sportscasters who make these determinations, and yet, unfortunately, the human factor there's likely still some bias.
Oh, I would agree with that.
Yeah,
I think,
and that's even as somebody who is quite set outside these sporting events, I still enjoy watching them and enjoy the technicalities within the mechanics within their competition, and I just prefer less bias. I recognize that there is much bias everywhere because we live in a human society. We built
humans
this
make
thing,
mistakes.
but
So that's a cause for that too.
And we built machines, and machines make mistakes because of us. But
and I just feel like 4 teams isn't enough for these reasons. As I've just stated, and the more teams, the less room for error for finding out who the best team is in the country, championship game or not. Then you can have anyone that seems deserving in it. 6 teams, 8 teams, 4 teams just isn't enough.
You really moved over.
Me?
Just that. Here, I'm gonna move you. There we go.
Yeah, I'm
Woo!
back.
It happened. So, with all that in mind, no real conclusive point, but very informative, at least towards myself. I'm curious about where you stand on. One, where is the standing on college players getting paid or promotions? 2, like actual legal promotions to actually play these days. 2, where do you stand on that, and how that could potentially affect, college football going forward?
At the moment, as a collegiate athlete, you cannot make money on your name, which I'm kind of torn on. I feel like if you're good enough, you should be able to sell your autograph. I don't think you should be able to accept endorsements because I think that can kind of. I mean, you're still in college. You should be learning. You're there.
There shouldn't be a trivialization. We shouldn't trivialize education.
Right. And that being said, as far as college athletes getting paid, do you know how much tuition costs? And for moving forward, and they're getting that stuff for free. So it's like, sure, it's not money in the pocket, but they're also not putting out any money. I want to say, if they're living on campus, like they get so much stipends for food and stuff too. So it's like they're really not putting out any money. But that's kind of where I believe that if you were to sell an autograph and you're good enough, you should be able to make a name for it. From what I've thought about and heard arguments, there's really no reason in which that can cause any kind of favoritism per schools. Or not, I can't see any that way. But whereas, if you start doing endorsements, you can say, oh, well, Oregon, for example, who was it? One of the CEO of Nike, for example, went to Oregon. That's why Oregon always had like these swanky ass jerseys because like he's like, all right, here is your new set of jerseys because Nike, Oregon, cool. Now it's like, okay, what if they start getting sponsored by Nike and these athletes start, getting money and stipends from Nike? Like Oregon's just going to be a powerhouse, which you can't really have that in college ball. You're supposed to have these changes. And I'm saying that in you have Ohio State and Alabama, which are constantly, on top of shit. But that's also because of fine recruiting and fine staffing and coaching and finding the right players. It's not bought out talent, which you do not and cannot have in college football. That's the beauty of it. Whereas professional sports, you often find that bought out talent, especially in the NFL.
That's why my brother is very much more into college ball because there's no they play to play. There's no incentivization.
Exactly.
I mean, pretty much everything you just said and more is more than what I would prefer to see because I'm more of a learned mind and I prefer it that way. I think obviously that makes me biased towards make sure your players are learning and make sure that there is an emphasis on education. Make sure that they can understand that, like, what they might sacrifice in playing this physical sport that is constantly kind of
scrutinized,
pushing damage on the skull. I think more and more we're starting to hear of stories where it's just like a player just wants to stop playing because they don't want to lose their fucking mind, and they don't go into professional sports, and instead they pursue an education. I always forget his name, but there was a player who played I think 2 years of football professionally. He threw a game-winning pass, and then the next year he signed a contract that was like far and above what he had started with, and then he retired. I forget what his name was, but I
think one of my story too.
Yeah, one of my preferred podcasts talks about him all the time, and I always forget his name. Of course, therein lies another side to this of this growing concern over head-to-head contact, concussions within one of the most American sports, football. Personally, I feel like if at any point athletes get any kind of recognition, whether they're allowed to sign autographs or whatnot, then any student who does something very knowledgeable, writes a paper, has the potential to even get published, then obviously they deserve that right.
I would agree with that as well.
But not only that, then perhaps the university should then be highlighting these students more. And that's where you start to really get into an interesting facet of this, because it really starts to become even more business-oriented, even towards education. And therein also lies the problem where our system works, but it is ridiculously expensive. Should it be? There are obviously systems that are working just fine, and in some places better around the world, that are nowhere near as expensive, but also don't have anywhere near as much grandeur. No sports teams, no big ceremonial graduations, and a lot of questions get brought up around this interesting thing of college football in America.
College sports in general. I mean, I think football is just the big one because there's so much hype around it.
So advertised,
Absolutely.
yeah. Obviously you have all these advertisements swirling around it. Big networks coming in onto these colleges, and all this hype around it, and then of course you also have the other perspective of tempering our ability to lose. Ohio State is a nice highlight of the bad, or even the bad shit that can happen when we lose, or even the bad shit that can happen when they fucking win at times over the past decade. When I was thinking about oh shit, what if we lose this, when it comes to the way Ohio State has reacted in its past before I was there, I was just like, oh man, what if we lose to Michigan? This could be bad. And you kind of look at this election season, how that can play on major losses, and should there also be a de-emphasization on, I don't know how to phrase this, but do you get what I'm saying here, where it's just it's not so important that we fucking win?
Yeah.
There used to be this ritual where a giant wave of students would walk through this 2 feet deep pond and sometimes trample other students to death.
Mirror Lake.
Mirror Lake. And it's just guys, it's not this important.
Yeah.
Where other kids would get tetanus. I think when the one kid, I think it was recently somebody drowned, and then they were like, we can't do this.
Yeah,
anymore.
last year someone died. I'm not sure how. I don't remember. Someone said I think
heart
attack or something.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, they also do this in the
drowning.
fucking
Yeah.
frigid cold.
Yeah.
And it's just like you emphasize so much on education, but then it's just like, go do this retarded thing.
Like, that
And
was
of course, like if somebody finds that, I might take flack for
Yeah,
it, but
like I'd gone there.
I did too.
I did not jump. But that's
Nor I.
Ohio State never. That was never sanctioned or
But
put
they
on by the university.
never.
They never stopped
But
it.
they never. Yeah, until now.
Until now. But I feel like that's just more. That's just college life than it is. In terms of than it is like football. I mean, I remember one year I was in the studio, I was doing work, and people were like, "Oh, let's go to Mirror Lake." I'm like, "All right, it's fine, let's check it out." And I think it's just a part of Ohio State life and tradition. I'm not sure why or where or when that started, but I think when you're at Ohio State and when they had Mirror Lake, you kind of like, I want to be a part of that tradition. I want to see what that's about. I want to just live my college life the way I should live my Ohio State college life.
But in turn, that also highlights another cultural, kind of issue of college life, where it's just like,
Get drunk.
some colleges actually police that, where it's just like you cannot, if you want to maintain your education, you cannot be irresponsible.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of mixed messaging. I love this word as of late. A lot of dissonance between all of these different elements. I think it's great that a lot of these elements come together, but of course then you have these huge pitfalls like the cost of living on a campus or gaining that education, as well as all of these costs of experiencing culture that is superimposed on students. Granted, we can be bigger people, but I can attest to how hard it is to be a bigger person around a culture that pushes these things on us. It was quite depressing to come from although I had grown to the point where I was just like, I am over drinking, I'm over all this, like, let's get on with it. And so luckily there was part of me that had come down from this, but nonetheless, when I came home from college, there was still this depression to go through of separating myself from all of these cultural elements. And I'm happy that I am now separated from them, but what's a thing to endure? And yeah, this has gotten a bit off topic, but it's interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't trade in my experience for anything.
There would be particular elements I might try to trade in, but nonetheless, it's it is what it is, and I think that there are a lot of different elements that we could definitely bring up in weeks to come. But as far as the culture around football goes, I think that there is this healthy spirit of competition. However, that spirit of competition gets out of hand at times, and also bleeds into other elements of our lives, like politics. And it is, of course, on education to educate us around that, and to make sure that we are aware that the winning is not of the utmost importance, especially in this situation where you see so many colleges with these liberal or die, or these kind of submit to this mentality, or shut the fuck up kind of, and that's very literal, unfortunately. Like, it hasn't happened at OSU yet, but like you hear about all of this around the nation, where, or at least the American nation, where there are a lot of people who are just like these kind of liberal or die mentalities, and there are plenty of different ways to think, and we have to be more accepting of that.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
any more on football?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I can go back and forth all day in my own brain about like the playoff system and the college athletes and getting paid or not.
Well, I love it when you can actually come out and inform me on a lot of these subjects.
Did I inform you today?
Absolutely. I didn't know as much about, like all the standings where Ohio State stands, and especially just even how playoffs and standing is judged. So
Well, we'll find out on Tuesday. That's the day they figure out who's going to go to the playoffs and blah blah blah. And it's I obviously I'd love to see Ohio State go, but if they don't, I would be entirely understandable because they didn't go to a championship game. Alabama did, Clemson did, Colorado did, Penn State did.
And that is kind of one of these shining examples to me of tempering our temperament. Where like last year you were a fucking like I had to hide the knives when you were here. And
if you like I've read some articles, listen to some analysts and are like just that team, that Ohio State team last year was just the best period that they've had in a long time. And what sucks is that that loss so late in the season just completely demolished our playoff chances, which is dumb. That shouldn't happen. Like we were a one-loss team, but it did happen.
Still, that loss is possible, and like you just seem to be kind of like you said, you meditate a lot more and you acknowledge a lot more, and I think those elements are really important, especially to our culture right now. And yeah, we just need to handle our temperaments better, and it's nice to see you grow, Marc.
You love to see me grow.
We're gonna go. If you liked us, do the thing. And internet, get out there and don't talk like this shitbag.
I'm a shitbag.
Thanks for watching. Of course, if you liked us, I always say do the thing. And Marc, what do we want the internet to get out there and do?
Do good things, internet.
Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one. And in case things get busy for us around this holiday season, in case I just want to take a fucking break because my birthday is on Christmas, see you next time. Travel safely. Happy holidays, just in case. But maybe, just maybe, you'll see more Great Scott Marcus before the holidays are truly upon us.